"Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins." The rain had not ceased for 3 days. It drummed softly upon the broken tiles of the temple of Melitele in Dreimholt, whispering through the half-shattered windows like a penitent spirit begging to be let in. The village crouched in the valley below, its chimneys cold, its streets thick with mud and silence. Crows perched upon the skeletal beams of burned cottages, black feathers slick and glistening in the dim light. Geralt of Rivia rode slowly into the village square, Roach snorting beneath him. The air smelled of smoke, damp wood, and something else, something foul and coppery, blood. The Witcher had followed its scent from the crossroads, where he had met a terrified merchant babbling of ghosts and slaughtered priests. Now before the steps of the ruined temple, he saw it for himself, the crimson trail winding like a serpent across the flagstones. 2 priestesses awaited him beneath the eaves. One was young, her robe torn and her eyes wide with fear. The other, older, held her composure with the stern grace of one who had seen worse. She stepped forward as Geralt dismounted, her rosary clutched tight between calloused fingers. "Witcher," she greeted, "I am Mother Corinne. We sent for you 3 days past. Thank the gods you came." Geralt nodded slightly, his voice low. "What happened here?" Corinne's eyes flicked toward the temple doors. "Death," she said simply, "and desecration. Our relic, our holiest of relics, was defiled. Since that night the ground itself weeps blood." He glanced toward the entrance. The massive oak doors hung open, one half cracked down the middle. Inside, the gloom pulsed faintly with the dull red of candles burning too low. The smell of iron was stronger there, mixed with incense and rot. "How many dead?" he asked. 12, Corinne whispered. 3 of them my sisters. The others, villagers who sought refuge here when the fighting came too near." Geralt said nothing for a long while. The wind caught the edges of his cloak, and the candles flickered in the darkness beyond the door. Finally he spoke. "Show me." Inside the temple was a ruin. Statues lay toppled, their marble faces split. The great altar at the far end, carved from a single block of white stone, was streaked with dried blood. A silver chalice lay overturned beside it, its stem bent. The Witcher's eyes moved slowly, methodically, across every shadow. He crouched near the altar, gloved fingers brushing the floor. The blood there had congealed in strange patterns, as though drawn deliberately, sigils that twisted the eye if one stared too long. "Who made these marks?" he asked. Mother Corinne hesitated. "We do not know. They were here when we found the bodies." "They weren't made with a knife?" Geralt muttered. "The edges are too clean. It burned into the stone." He reached into his satchel and drew out a small vial of powdered verdigris, sprinkling it across one of the sigils. The powder hissed faintly and turned black. "Magic," he said. "Old magic, dangerous." The younger priestess gasped. "You mean sorcery? Here? But this is sacred ground." Geralt rose slowly, his eyes pale and unreadable. "Sacred or not, someone broke a seal that should have remained closed." Corinne's face paled. "You think this is a curse?" He didn't answer. Instead, he moved toward the rear of the hall where the relic chamber stood, a small sanctum sealed by a door of wrought iron. It had once been adorned with runes of protection, though now many were scorched or scraped away. He touched one with his fingertips. It crumbled like ash. "Open it," he said. The older woman hesitated only a moment before producing a ring of keys. The door groaned as it swung inward. The chamber beyond was narrow and low, lined with votive offerings, candles, small effigies, bowls of dried herbs. At its center stood a pedestal, its top shattered. Among the shards glittered fragments of a golden reliquary shaped like a sunburst. Geralt stepped closer. "What was kept here?" "The heart of Saint Lysena," Corinne said softly, "said to guard our temple from evil. It has lain here since the founding of Dreimhold. And now it's gone." "Yes." Geralt knelt, studying the shards. A faint residue glowed within the cracks, reddish, faintly pulsing. He brought it close to his face and sniffed. The scent was unlike any herb or blood he knew. Bitter, sharp, and strangely cold. He rose. "Whatever was bound here is loose again." The words hung in the air like frost. Outside, thunder rolled over the valley. The younger priestess shuddered. "Then we are doomed." "Not yet," Geralt said, buckling his sword. "Tell your sisters to light no fires tonight, and stay together. Whatever walks this ground now hunts by warmth and fear." He stepped toward the door, his white hair catching the candlelight like silver threads. Mother Corinne's voice followed him. "You will find it then? You will destroy it?" Geralt paused on the threshold, rain whispering beyond. "I'll try," he said, "but remember, monsters rarely come from nowhere. Someone called it here." He vanished into the storm, and the temple doors closed behind him with a sound like the end of a prayer. That night, Dreimhold did not sleep. Somewhere in the fields beyond, a howl rose, long, mournful, and thick with bloodlust. And Geralt of Rivia followed the sound into the dark. The rain thickened as the Witcher made his way down the broken path that led from the temple to the river's edge. The night pressed close around him, damp and heavy, full of the rustling whispers of wet reeds and unseen wings. Dreimhold lay behind him like a shrouded corpse, silent except for the wind that moaned through its chimneys. Ahead, the land descended toward the old battlefield, where men had killed one another for causes already forgotten. Geralt crouched near a twisted willow, tracing the muddy ground with gloved fingers. The tracks were faint but clear enough to his trained eyes. Human footprints, several sets, heading toward the ruins of an old watchtower beyond the river. Among them, deeper impressions, bare feet, elongated toes, clawed at the edges, not human. He rose, hand resting on the hilt of his silver sword. The rain washed over his face, cold and clean, and he could taste the iron tang of what lay ahead. Something had risen from the sealed crypt beneath the temple, something ancient, bound by faith and fear. The wind carried a sound, a low hum, almost like chanting but broken, distorted. Geralt moved silently through the reeds, his cat-like eyes glinting in the dark. The ruined watchtower came into view, a skeletal shape against the bruised sky. Firelight flickered within. He crept closer, boots sinking into the mud. Through a collapsed archway he saw them, 3 men in torn armor, kneeling before a makeshift altar of stones. Upon it lay a bloodied relic fragment, the remnants of the shattered reliquary. One of the men held a dagger and spoke words no man should speak aloud. The air quivered, and the candle flame burned blue. "Stop," Geralt said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the rain like a drawn blade. The men froze. The one with the dagger turned, his eyes wide and glassy. "Too late, Witcher," he rasped. "We only finish what we began." He plunged the dagger into his own palm, letting the blood fall upon the fragment. The ground trembled. Geralt drew his silver sword in one smooth motion. Fools! The first man lunged. Geralt sidestepped and struck him down, blade flashing in the firelight. The second ran, but the Witcher's hand caught him, pulled him close, and the pommel of the sword met his temple. He fell without a sound. The third man laughed, a cracked, unnatural sound as the blood pooled around the relic and began to rise, twisting upward like smoke.
A shape formed within the red mist, long limbs, a head crowned with horns of shadow, and eyes that gleamed like molten gold. The crimson shade. Geralt leapt back, muttering a sign. Erden. A ring of violet fire burst to life around him, the protective glyph searing the mud. The creature shrieked, a sound like 1,000 whispers flayed raw, and lunged at him. The Witcher met it head-on. Steel flashed, carving through the misty form, but the blade met little resistance. The shade recoiled, reforming in an instant, its clawed hand striking across his chest. Pain flared, but Geralt's armor held. He spun, igniting another sign, Igni, and fire roared forth, briefly illuminating the rain-soaked night. The spirit screamed, retreating to the broken altar. Geralt advanced, but the ground erupted beneath him, flinging him backward into the mud. When he rose again, the shade was gone. Only the dead men remained, their faces twisted in rapture and terror. Geralt spat blood and wiped the rain from his eyes. He examined the altar. The relic shard was gone, leaving behind a smear of ash and frost. The air was colder now. The curse had deepened. He rode back toward Dreimholt before dawn, the rain easing into a thin drizzle. When the temple bell tolled faintly in the distance, he knew something was wrong. The doors stood open once more, though he had ordered them barred. Inside candles burned where none should. The scent of incense mingled with blood anew. Mother Corinne awaited him near the altar, her face pale and drawn. Around her lay the bodies of 2 more priestesses. It came again, she whispered, during the night. The walls bled, the very icons wept. Geralt approached the bodies kneeling beside them. Their throats were torn, the flesh blackened around the wounds. Not claw marks, energy burns. He felt the faint pulse of magic still lingering. "Where's the young one?" he asked. Corinne hesitated. "Sister Elaine? She vanished when the storm broke. I feared." Geralt rose sharply. "You should have told me sooner." The older woman's composure cracked. "We are not soldiers, Witcher. We prayed for deliverance. We thought..." He turned away, scanning the shadows. "Prayers won't stop what's coming." Outside, a faint cry carried through the mist. A woman's voice. Geralt was already moving. He found her near the edge of the graveyard, kneeling among the stones. Her white robes were soaked and clung to her form, her hands trembling as she traced a sigil into the mud. A small golden pendant gleamed at her neck, the same shape as the missing relic. "Elaine," Geralt said quietly, "step away from that." She turned, eyes gleaming with unnatural light. "Do you not feel it, Witcher? The goddess awakens. Her blood sanctifies this place again." He took a cautious step forward. "That's not your goddess. It's using you." She smiled faintly. "You fear holiness." Geralt's hand tightened on his sword. "I fear corruption wearing holiness as a mask." For a moment the girl's expression faltered, as though some part of her fought to surface. Then the light in her eyes flared bright crimson. The ground beneath her feet cracked, and a chill wind swept through the graveyard. The crimson shade rose behind her, its form towering, its edges flickering like fire seen through fog. The pendant at Elaine's throat pulsed in rhythm with the creature's heart. Geralt drew his silver blade once more. "So that's where you went." The spirit hissed, a sound like steam escaping from 1,000 unseen wounds. Elaine lifted her arms, her voice no longer her own. "Blood for sanctity, death for peace." Geralt moved fast, casting Quen as the shade lunged. The protective sign flared golden, absorbing the first blow. He slashed low, severing the spirit's limb. It reformed instantly. The girl screamed, clutching her chest. "Break the link," Geralt muttered through clenched teeth. "Destroy the pendant." But the chain was fused to her skin. The shade turned its burning gaze upon him, and in that moment, Geralt saw through its illusion. It wasn't merely a ghost. It was the echo of every sacrifice, every death that had ever soaked this ground. The faith of centuries, twisted into hunger. Lightning split the sky. Geralt lunged, his sword gleaming white. The blade struck the pendant squarely, shattering it. A burst of light engulfed them both. When the brightness faded, the shade was gone. Elaine lay motionless among the graves. The rain fell again soft and endless. Geralt sheathed his sword, kneeling beside her. She breathed barely. "It's gone," she whispered. "The goddess, she's free." He looked toward the temple, where the candles had all gone out. The air was still at last. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe it's only sleeping again." He lifted the girl gently and carried her back through the mist. Behind them the earth drank the last of the blood, and the holy ground fell silent once more. The dawn that followed was gray and pale, as though the sun itself feared to rise over Dreimholt. Mist clung to the valley, curling low between the stones of the ruined temple and creeping across the village roofs like the breath of something dying. Geralt stood on the temple steps, arms crossed, his eyes drawn to the forested hills to the east. The silence that lingered after the night's battle was heavier than before. Mother Corinne came to stand beside him, her cloak pulled tightly about her shoulders. Her voice was hoarse, broken by exhaustion. "She sleeps," she said quietly. "The young one, she will live, you think?" "She'll live," Geralt replied, not turning his gaze from the fog. "But something's still wrong." The priestess followed his stare. "The air feels different." Geralt nodded. "The spirit's gone, yes. But whatever bound it to this place, whatever fed it, remains." He took a slow breath, tasting the scent of damp stone and old blood. Beneath it, faint but distinct, was another smell. Rot. Not the rot of corpses, but of something older, buried. He turned suddenly, eyes narrowing. "Show me the crypt beneath the temple." Mother Corinne hesitated. "That place has been sealed for a century, even before my time." "It's open now," he said flatly, "whether by the shade or by someone's hand." The descent into the crypt began behind the altar, where a narrow stair spiraled downward into the dark. The air grew colder as they went, thick with dust and the faint echo of dripping water. The Witcher's cat-like pupils widened, catching every glint of light from his torch. At the base of the stairs lay an iron gate, its lock shattered. Beyond, the passage opened into a wide chamber lined with ancient tombs. The walls were carved with the sigils of Melitele, though many had been defaced, scratched through by claws or burned by fire. Geralt moved among the sarcophagi, scanning the stone lids, the runes, the faint trails of soot. "This wasn't the Shade's work," he said.
Someone came here before it was freed. Corinne's voice echoed faintly in the chamber. We keep no records of such visits. The only key to this place was held by my predecessor. Then your predecessor wasn't the only one with access. At the far end of the crypt stood an altar of black stone, older than the temple above. On it rested a cracked slab marked by a single deep groove, as though a blade had split it. Beside it lay a broken chain, its links dark with age. Geralt touched the stone, and his fingers came away stained red. Fresh blood, he murmured. Corinne shivered. But who would... She stopped, her eyes widening. From somewhere deeper within the catacombs came a low sound, a wet, dragging rasp, like claws scraping against stone. Geralt drew his silver sword silently. Stay behind me. The torchlight wavered as they moved forward deeper into the shadows. The passage narrowed, leading into a vaulted chamber lined with bones. There, upon the floor, lay the remains of a man in a torn cassock. His skull was crushed, his ribs broken outward, but what caught Geralt's eye was the medallion at the man's throat, a sunburst of gold. Corinne gasped. That's the sigil of High Priest Othmar. He vanished 50 years ago. Geralt crouched beside the body. The flesh had not rotted. It was blackened, preserved as though burned by sorcery. He vanished because he tried to contain the shade, he said, and failed. Something stirred. A whisper swept through the crypt, not of air but of memory. Geralt's medallion vibrated violently. From the shadows behind the altar, a shape began to take form, human at first, then dissolving into smoke. A voice emerged, hollow and distant. You should not have come here, Witcher. Geralt's sword rose instinctively. You're not the shade. No, the voice replied, echoing through the stones. I am what remains of him who bound it. I am Othmar's sin. The figure stepped forward, translucent and terrible, a spirit bound to his own failure. His eyes glowed like dying embers. I sought to cleanse Dreimholt with faith, but faith is not enough against hunger older than gods. The blood of innocence fed it, and now it feeds still. Corinne fell to her knees, trembling. Holy Melitele, forgive. Prayers won't help, Geralt said. Tell me, ghost, what sustains it now? The spirit's gaze drifted to the ceiling. The relic you saw, the heart of Saint Lysena, it was no blessing. It was a vessel. We bound the curse within it, thinking to sanctify it through worship. Every prayer, every offering strengthened the chain, until the chain broke. Geralt's eyes narrowed. And now it's loose again, feeding on the faith of this place. Faith turned sour becomes blood, the spirit whispered. The holy ground is poisoned by belief itself. Before Geralt could speak again, the apparition shuddered violently. The torchlight dimmed, and a tremor ran through the floor. It awakens once more, the ghost hissed. The relic's fragments are calling to each other. The chamber erupted in a sudden gust of wind, snuffing out the torches. Geralt caught Corinne by the arm and pulled her toward the stairs. Behind them, the spirit's voice rose to a wail that was neither human nor divine. They burst into the open air, coughing as cold light returned. The temple bell clanged once, though no hand touched it. Across the valley, a flock of crows rose, screaming into the sky. Geralt looked toward the far ridge where the battlefield lay beneath the fog. A red shimmer pulsed faintly there, like the glow of distant fire. The relic's pieces, he muttered. Someone's gathering them. Corinne's face drained of color. Who would dare? Someone who believes they can control it. He whistled for Roach, who appeared from the mist as if conjured. As he mounted, Corinne caught his arm. "If you go there, Witcher, you go to your death." Geralt looked down at her, eyes cold and calm. "I've met death before." He spurred Roach into motion, the horse's hooves splashing through the flooded path. Behind him the temple loomed in silence once more, its spire lost in the mist. As he rode, the mist thickened, swallowing sound. The ground grew uneven, pocked with old craters from forgotten wars. Broken swords jutted from the soil like grave markers, and among them faint red motes began to rise, drifting toward the ridge ahead. When he reached the crest, he saw it clearly, a circle of figures in armor kneeling before a mound of stones. Upon the mound burned a crimson flame, and in its heart floated the fragments of the relic, spinning slowly in the air. At their head stood a man in tattered noble garb, his face hidden beneath a hood. Geralt recognized him at once, the Baron of Dreimholt, long rumored dead after the last Nilfgaard raid. "Baron Volker," he said, dismounting, "you've been busy." The man turned, his eyes gleaming with feverish light. "You shouldn't have interfered, Witcher."
"The gods demand sacrifice, and I will give it to them." "That's no god you're serving," Geralt said, drawing his sword. "It's a curse, and it will eat you whole." Volker smiled, thin and cold. "Better to be devoured by divinity than forgotten by men." He raised his hands, and the red flame roared higher. The relic's shards fused together with a shriek of metal and light, forming a single, pulsing heart. The ground beneath their feet trembled. Geralt lunged forward as the first soldier turned his spear upon him. The Witcher's blade met steel with a ringing clash, and the battle began beneath a sky that burned crimson. The Baron's laughter carried through the storm as the cursed relic came alive once more, and the holy ground of Dreimholt drank blood again. The battlefield roared with the fury of the past and the present, mingled into one long scream. Every strike of steel echoed the ghosts of the war fought here decades ago. The rain fell harder, thick as smoke, soaking the ground until blood and mud became one. Geralt's boots sank deep as he pivoted, his silver blade flashing in wide arcs that caught the torchlight of the Baron's circle. The soldiers before him were no ordinary men. Their faces were pale, eyes vacant, their movements jerky, puppets bound by magic rather than sinew. The crimson glow from the relic's heart pulsed through their veins like molten wire, driving them forward even as Geralt's sword split flesh from bone. They did not scream when they died. They simply fell, twitching, their blood hissing where it touched the cursed ground. At the center of it all stood Baron Volker. He raised his arms to the storm, chanting words drawn from no human tongue. The relic above him pulsed with growing intensity, casting red light across the battlefield, painting the ruins, the corpses, and the Witcher himself in the color of blood. "Volker!" Geralt shouted, breaking through a ring of soldiers. "You don't command it, you're feeding it." The Baron turned, his face a mask of wild devotion. "You think I fear death, mutant? I have seen the goddess. I have felt her hunger. Through me she shall be reborn. Through you she'll destroy what's left of this land." Volker laughed, a cracked, triumphant sound, and struck his palm with a dagger, letting blood pour freely onto the relic. The red light swelled until it hurt to look upon. The wind howled, carrying whispers that clawed at the edge of sanity. The ground began to heave, splitting open as though something beneath sought escape. Geralt muttered a curse under his breath. He cast Írden, planting the sign's violet ring in the mud. The magical circle shuddered, anchoring a fragile barrier as the force of the curse slammed outward like a tidal wave. The Witcher's medallion buzzed violently, warning him of power far beyond mortal craft. From the fissure at Volker's feet emerged the Shade, reborn but greater than before. It towered over them, its form solidifying into something monstrous, a being of armor and blood, its chest glowing with a stolen relic. Its face was a skull of molten gold, and its eyes burned with divine wrath. The Baron fell to his knees, arms spread wide. "Bless me, O Mother of Mercy!" The creature regarded him for a heartbeat, and then struck. The Baron's body was lifted into the air, crushed and torn apart in a rain of gore. The relic flared brighter as it absorbed his life. Geralt leapt aside, avoiding the surge of blood that hissed like acid where it struck the ground. He knew then there was no containing this thing, only destroying it. He drew his silver sword again, muttering the incantations Vesemir had taught him long ago, words for fighting what should not exist. The Shade turned its gaze upon him. Its voice came as a chorus of many, echoing from the very soil. "You carry no faith, mutant. You cannot touch me." Geralt spat into the mud. "Good thing I brought silver instead." He charged. The first blow met the creature's arm, shattering bone that was not bone. The Shade retaliated, its claws slicing through air faster than sound. Geralt rolled, the strike missing his head by inches, leaving a furrow in the ground where he'd stood. He cast Ard, the blast of telekinetic force slamming into the monster, driving it back a step. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the grotesque form fully. A knight carved from agony, veins glowing crimson beneath a shell of spectral armor. The Witcher's mind worked swiftly. The relic's heart was the anchor. Destroy it, and the Shade would collapse. But it was embedded in the creature's chest, beating with unnatural vigor. He ducked another swing and slashed at the creature's leg. His sword bit deep, severing tendons of shadow. The Shade howled, a sound that made the very clouds shiver. Geralt felt his bones ache with the force of it. He struck again, driving the point of his blade toward its core, but the creature's claw caught him mid-strike and hurled him backward. He hit the ground hard, the breath driven from his lungs. Pain flared across his ribs. Roach neighed somewhere in the dark, and Geralt rolled just as a wave of blood crashed where he had lain. The mud steamed, sizzling where the cursed fluid touched it. The Witcher rose, staggering. His left arm throbbed, likely fractured, but he ignored it. He drew a small vial from his belt and bit out the cork. The liquid burned down his throat like molten iron. Thunderbolt. His muscles tightened. His veins sang with fire. He lunged forward again, faster now, every motion honed by the elixir's cruel clarity. The Shade met him with a roar, claws cutting arcs of light through the rain. Geralt dodged, pivoted, and struck low. The silver blade sheared through the creature's abdomen, splitting its form. The relic flared, bleeding crimson energy. He pressed his attack, driving the Shade backward into the fissure from which it had risen. The ground cracked beneath them, swallowing corpses and armor alike. Lightning struck the hilltop, igniting the red mist in a brief blaze of white. And then, for the first time, the Shade hesitated. Its form flickered, faltering. Through the storm, Geralt glimpsed movement, figures emerging from the mist. The priestesses of Melitele, led by Mother Corinne, clutching their sacred torches and rosaries. They formed a circle at the edge of the battlefield,
chanting the old prayers, not the twisted verses the Baron had uttered, but the pure ancient invocations meant to sanctify the ground. Their voices rose, trembling but resolute. The relic pulsed erratically, as if torn between hunger and fear. Geralt seized the moment. He hurled a dancing star bomb straight at the shade's chest. The explosion tore through the creature, scattering molten fragments of its form. The relic screamed, a high metallic wail that shook the air. The Witcher leapt, sword poised. He drove the silver blade straight into the heart of the relic. The impact flared, brighter than lightning. The world became light and sound, an endless roar, a rush of wind, then silence. When Geralt opened his eyes, he was lying among the ruins. The rain had stopped. The clouds had parted, revealing the pale face of dawn. All around him lay the bodies of the fallen, still at last. The fissure had closed, leaving only scorched earth. He pushed himself upright, his limbs trembling. The relic's fragments lay scattered, dull and lifeless now. The shade was gone. Mother Corinne approached slowly, her robes torn and muddy, her face streaked with tears. "Is it over?" she whispered. Geralt looked out over the battlefield, the first rays of sunlight gleaming upon the wet soil. "For now," he said, "but curses like this don't vanish. They wait. They sleep beneath faith and folly till someone wakes them again." She bowed her head. "Then we shall keep watch." The Witcher sheathed his sword and turned toward the rising sun. "Do that," he said, "and pray that men remember what their prayers can summon." As he mounted Roach, the wind stirred the broken banners on the hill, whispering through the bones of the dead. Dreimholt lay quiet in the distance, its temple battered but standing still. The morning light turned the mist to gold. Geralt of Rivia rode away without looking back, leaving behind the holy ground that had drunk too much blood. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the air, soft, uneasy, like the breath of a god that had not yet finished dreaming. The Witcher rode west through the lowlands, away from the hollow ruin that had been Dreimholt. The morning was young, but the sky hung heavy with smoke, for the battlefield still smoldered in places where the lightning had struck. The wind carried the scent of scorched earth and rain-washed blood. Even Roach moved uneasily, ears twitching at every rustle in the reeds. Geralt kept his eyes forward, his thoughts circling like vultures over what had passed. He had slain the shade, shattered the relic, and silenced the cursed ground, yet he could not shake the feeling that something of it still followed him. A Witcher trusted his instincts, and his told him that Dreimholt's story was not finished. By midday, he reached the crossroads, where a half-toppled signpost pointed toward Novigrad on one arm and the Yaruga's ford on the other. The third arm, blackened and splintered, had once borne the name of Dreimholt, now scorched beyond recognition. A pair of peasants stood nearby, loading sacks of barley onto an old cart. They watched the Witcher pass, but said nothing. Only when he was several paces away did one whisper, "He's the one what went up to the temple, killed a demon, they say." Geralt heard but did not turn. Words like that spread faster than disease, and the truth rotted just as quickly. As evening drew near, the land softened into rolling meadows dotted with ruins, remnants of forgotten watchtowers, abbeys long abandoned, and stones so old even elves had ceased to name them. The Witcher dismounted to let Roach drink from a stream that glittered faintly in the dying light. The water ran red with clay, though For a heartbeat, he thought it blood. He crouched by the bank, fingers tracing the ripples. The medallion at his throat gave a single faint tremor. Not a curse this time, but something else. Something watchful. He glanced toward the far tree line. A figure stood there motionless, cloaked in gray. Geralt rose slowly, hand resting on his sword. "You've been following me since Dreimholt," he said, his voice calm but edged. "You can come out now." The figure stepped into the open. A woman, tall and slender, with hair black as a raven's wing. Her eyes were sharp, glinting with amusement rather than fear. She wore a traveler's cloak, though the embroidery on its hem spoke of nobility. "I meant no harm, Witcher," she said. Her voice carried the soft accent of the southern duchies. "Only curiosity. Few men survive a curse like the one that slept in Dreimholt." Geralt did not lower his guard. "Curiosity's a poor reason to stalk someone armed with 2 swords. "Perhaps," she said, smiling faintly, "but I needed to know if the stories were true, that the white wolf still hunts." He frowned. "Who are you?" "A historian," she said, stepping closer. "Of sorts. My name is Irina. I collect tales of the old gods, those that men pretend to forget, but never truly do. What happened in Dreimholt interests me greatly." "Then you've got a poor choice of hobbies," Geralt replied. "That place is cursed beyond study. Best let the past rot where it lies." Her eyes lingered on him. "And yet you came out alive. That means the curse wasn't only blood and magic. It was faith turned feral, faith that once had a name. Melitele, yes, but older still. The Crimson Shade is a remnant of her forgotten twin." Geralt's jaw tightened. "You talk like a sorceress." Irina tilted her head. "I study what they prefer to burn. But if names matter, yes, I was trained in Aretuza. I left before they decided which of us were worth keeping." He said nothing, though suspicion lingered in his pale eyes. Irina crouched by the stream, letting the water run over her fingers. "The spirit you destroyed won't rest long," she murmured. "It was bound through worship, through ritual. When you broke the relic, you broke the prison, not the prisoner." "I noticed." She looked up at him, her expression grave. "The temple at Dreimholt was only one sanctuary. There are others, 3 at least, that hold fragments of the same binding. When one fails, the others weaken. Tell me, Witcher, did you not feel it even now? The ground sighing beneath your feet?" Geralt's silence was answer enough. He'd felt it since leaving the valley. A subtle thrum beneath the soil, like a heartbeat too slow to belong to any living thing. "You came looking for me," he said flatly. "Why?" "Because you're the only one who's killed what was once divine," she said. "And because the next sanctuary lies along your path, though you don't yet know it, west of here, near the ruins of Holm Keep." Geralt adjusted Roach's reins. "If you know so much, you can handle it yourself." "I would, were it simple sorcery," she said, standing. "But the curse is flesh now. It needs a sword as much as it needs knowledge." The Witcher studied her, measuring the calm in her tone. He had seen lies in every shape, trembling, desperate, pleading. Hers was steady, too steady to be entirely false. "Holm Keep," he repeated. "That place is a ruin?" "Exactly," she said softly, "and something stirs beneath its chapel floor. The same red light that burned in Dreimholt has been seen there at night. If it wakes, it will spread, one sanctuary collapsing into another until the land itself becomes its altar." Geralt sighed, the sound low and weary. "Seems the continent never runs short of damned places." "Nor of men willing to damn them further."
Irina said. Will you come? He looked west, where the sun bled across the horizon. The light pooled like blood upon the grass. I'll go, he said. But not for gods or relics, for the living. I've seen enough corpses preaching salvation. She smiled faintly. That's all I hope to hear. They traveled together as night fell, their path winding through fields of wet heather and half-buried stones. The air grew colder, the stars distant and sharp. In the darkness, Irina told him what she knew, that Holm Keep had once served as a fortress temple during the first Nilfgaardian wars, that a sect of priest knights had guarded its relic until the day they vanished, leaving only silence behind. And the people nearby? Geralt asked. They keep away, she said. They say the wind there smells of blood. Children are born pale and crops fail. The priests call it punishment. I call it consequence. They made camp in a hollow between two hills. Geralt built the fire while Irina drew strange symbols in the dirt with a piece of charcoal. He watched her quietly, the flames casting both their faces in gold. You really think it's all one curse? He asked at last. I don't think, she said. I know. The old faith was never singular. The goddess had two faces, mercy and vengeance. The priests of Melitele buried the darker one, believing they could pray it into silence. But the world forgets nothing. Geralt stared into the flames. Then I'll find it and silence it again. Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable. Be careful, Witcher. You can't kill what men still worship. Maybe not, he said, eyes half-lidded, but I can make it bleed. The fire crackled between them, and above, the stars wheeled slowly across a sky the color of iron. Far to the west, unseen beyond the hills, a faint red shimmer rose from the horizon, brief, like the last heartbeat of something that refused to die. And as the Witcher slept, his medallion trembled once more, humming with the promise of blood and faith yet to come. The dawn came thin and gray, pulling a veil of mist across the land, as if to hide what the night had whispered. The campfire had died to ash, its smoke curling lazily into the chill morning air. Geralt stirred first, his Witcher senses already awake before his body. He rose in silence, the faint hum of danger lingering in his medallion like an echo from a bad dream. Irina still slept, her cloak drawn close, one hand resting upon a worn leather satchel that seemed to contain half her life. The Witcher glanced toward the hills beyond their camp, their edges sharp against the pale horizon. Somewhere beyond them lay Holm Keep, another relic of faith, another scar upon the land. Roach nickered softly, sensing movement. Geralt laid a calming hand on the mare's neck. Easy, he murmured. We'll be gone soon enough. By the time Irina woke, the Witcher had already packed. She blinked at the low light, then at the stillness in his stance. You heard it too, she said quietly. He looked over his shoulder. The chanting? She nodded, rubbing sleep from her eyes. It came from the west, faint but steady. It wasn't wind, he said. Voices carried through the mist. Human ones. Probably pilgrims or fools. She rose, brushing dirt from her skirt. Pilgrims still travel to Holm Keep. They believe the goddess hears prayers whispered there. They don't realize it's the other face that listens. Geralt checked his blades, tightening the straps across his back. Then we'd best hurry before faith feeds something it shouldn't. They rode westward through the thickening fog. The land rose gradually, the path narrowing between cliffs streaked with moss. By midday, the sun had begun to pierce the clouds, revealing a distant silhouette on the horizon,
a crumbling fortress perched upon a ridge, its towers half collapsed, its chapel spire leaning like a wounded sentinel. Holm Keep. As they drew nearer, they saw the remnants of an old village sprawled beneath its shadow. Roofless cottages, broken fences, and the long dead frames of wagons half buried in grass. Crows circled above, their cries echoing through the still air. Geralt dismounted at the edge of the ruins. "Stay with Roach," he told Irina. "If you hear me shout, ride." "I've come this far," she said firmly. "If it's awakening again, I need to see it." He gave her a look that was more weary than unkind. "Seeing might be the last thing you do." Nevertheless, she followed. They moved quietly through the village. The Witcher's eyes scanned the ground. Footprints, shallow but recent, leading toward the chapel, too small for soldiers. Pilgrims, as Irina had guessed. But something was wrong. The prints ended abruptly in the dust before the chapel doors, as though the owners had vanished into air. The heavy oak doors were half open. The interior beyond was dark, the air thick with incense gone sour. Geralt entered first, sword drawn, every nerve attuned. The chapel was vast, its roof broken, letting pale shafts of light fall upon shattered pews and statues streaked with soot. At the altar's base knelt 3 figures in ragged robes. Their heads were bowed in prayer, hands clasped. "Stay back," Geralt whispered. He approached slowly, circling to the side. The smell hit him first, sweet, cloying, unmistakable. Rot. The pilgrims did not move. Their skin, when the Witcher crouched beside them, was gray and stiff. They had been dead for days, yet their lips still moved faintly, as if whispering words the air could no longer bear. "Necromantic influence," Irina murmured from the doorway, horror creeping into her voice. "But this isn't any spell I know." Geralt straightened. "Not necromancy," he said. "Possession." As if on cue, the bodies stirred. Their heads lifted in unison, eyes glowing faintly red. Their mouths opened, and the same voice came from all 3, deep, ancient, and cold. "Faith binds flesh as iron binds stone. The chain remains unbroken." Geralt's sword was already in motion. The first blow severed a head. The second split a torso. The third body lunged faster than its frame should allow, but the Witcher's blade met it mid-stride, cutting it down. The corpses fell still. He exhaled through his teeth, scanning the altar. The air shimmered faintly above it, as though heat rose from invisible fire. Carved into the stone was the same sigil he'd seen in Dreimholt, a sun divided by a bleeding line. "The same curse," he said, "the same seal." Irina stepped closer, tracing the grooves with a gloved hand, but deeper here, stronger. "Because this is older," Geralt said. "This was the source." A faint rumble echoed through the chapel floor. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Beneath the altar came a hollow sound, like distant thunder or movement. Geralt crouched. The stones beneath the altar were newer than the rest of the chapel, crudely mortared. He pressed his palm against them, feeling the tremor that ran through. "There's something sealed under here." Irina's voice lowered. "Then it still lives." Before Geralt could reply, the ground split. The stones erupted upward in a burst of crimson light. Both were thrown backward, dust filling the air. When it cleared, a gaping pit yawned where the altar had stood. From its depths rose a hand, pale, skeletal, dripping with dark blood that hissed where it fell. Then another. Geralt was on his feet instantly, silver sword gleaming. The creature that emerged was no ghost. It was flesh, once human, now twisted beyond recognition. A priest's tattered robe clung to its frame, and the symbol of Melitele hung burned into its chest.
Its face was hollow, its mouth too wide, whispering words that scraped against sanity. "Blessed be the faithful," it murmured. "Blessed be the offering." Geralt struck, his sword flashing in a wide arc. The creature caught the blade with its bare hand, hissing as silver burned through its flesh. But it did not fall. Instead, it pushed forward, strength unnatural, forcing the Witcher back across the broken pews. He braced and muttered, "Ard." The blast sent the abomination crashing into the far wall. The stones cracked, but the thing only laughed, a wet, choking sound. Irina chanted something under her breath, her hands tracing sigils in the air. Blue light gathered between her palms, shooting toward the creature. The spell struck, freezing its limbs in place, but the magic faltered almost at once. "It feeds on faith," she gasped. "On belief itself. My power fuels it." "Then stop believing," Geralt growled, charging again. He feinted left, drove his blade through its chest, and twisted hard. The creature howled, collapsing to its knees. Its body melted into ash, but beneath it pulsed another relic, a small orb of glass, within which flickered the same red glow as the heart in Dreimholt. Geralt sheathed his sword and crouched. The orb vibrated faintly, its hum resonating through the floor. "It's part of the same chain," Irina whispered, staring. "One link broken, another awakened." Geralt lifted it carefully with a leather cloth. "Then we'll keep breaking them," he said. Irina's eyes darkened. "And when the last link snaps, what then?" He met her gaze, his own steady and cold. "Then we see what's really been waiting to be free." Outside, the wind rose, carrying the faint toll of a bell from no visible tower. The sky had darkened once more, red bleeding through the clouds. Holm Keep stood silent above them, its shadow stretching long and thin across the dying light. Geralt of Rivia glanced toward the horizon, where storm clouds gathered like the wings of something vast. "We're running out of time," he said softly. And somewhere far behind them, in Dreimholt perhaps, or beneath the soil of the valley, the earth gave a long, low sigh, as if exhaling after centuries of patience. The storm did not come swiftly. It crept upon them like a beast stalking its prey. For half a day the clouds had gathered across the northern sky, and by dusk thunder rolled among the peaks, low and heavy, promising rain that would scour the land clean. The Witcher and the sorceress rode in silence along a path that wound through a forest of twisted birch and ash. Every so often Geralt would glance at the small leather pouch at his belt where the crimson orb from Holm Keep pulsed faintly, like a second heart. Irina rode beside him, her eyes distant. Since leaving the chapel, she'd spoken little, and when she did, her words came measured, as though each one were weighed carefully before being allowed to escape. At last, Geralt broke the silence. "You've been quiet since Holm. Something you haven't told me?" Her gaze flicked toward him, then away again. "When we shattered the altar, I felt it. Not a curse awakening, but something older, a summoning. The relics aren't prisons, Witcher. They're keys." Geralt frowned. "Keys to what?" "To her," Irina said. "To the goddess they buried, the one Melitele replaced. The name has been lost, but in some texts she's called Lilith the Veiled, Lady of Vengeance. When the priests sealed her temples, they thought they were killing her faith. Instead, they scattered it. 3 relics, 3 hearts, sleeping until the faithful grew desperate enough to call her back. Geralt rode on, his eyes narrowing. You said there were 3 sanctuaries. Dreimholt, Holm Keep. Where's the 3rd? North, she said softly. Across the river, in the mountains of Velgen. A monastery built by those who fled the first wars. The last link in the chain. Then that's where we go. The trees thinned as they spoke, revealing a narrow valley below. Through the mist, they saw the lights of a hamlet, a scattering of huts, a smithy, and an inn crouched near the road. Smoke rose from chimneys, faint against the coming storm. Geralt slowed Roach's pace. We'll rest here. The horses need it, and you look like you haven't eaten in a day. I doubt food will sit well, she muttered. But she followed him down the slope. The inn was a squat, timbered building called the Broken Pike, its sign swinging on rusted chains. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, mead, and the smell of wet leather. The few patrons turned as the Witcher entered, men with faces like dried bark, their eyes wary. One muttered something about mutants under his breath, but Geralt ignored it. He found a table near the fire. Irina joined him, lowering her hood. The innkeeper, a stout woman with sharp eyes, approached. "You'll want stew then," she said, eyeing the Witcher's weapons. "And ale to wash the road dust from your throat." "2 bowls," Geralt said, "and the ale." When she left, Irina leaned closer, her voice low. "They fear you. They fear what they don't understand," he replied. "Same reason men build temples and monsters crawl out of them." Their food arrived steaming, thick with potatoes and a few unidentifiable scraps of meat. Neither spoke for a while. The rain began outside, drumming hard upon the roof, and thunder followed soon after, shaking the rafters. When the door creaked open again, Geralt's medallion stirred. He looked up sharply. A man had entered, tall, wearing a soaked cloak, his face hidden by a hood. He walked with the heavy steps of someone carrying both armor and purpose. He went straight to the counter, speaking softly to the innkeeper, who nodded and gestured toward Geralt's table. The man approached. White hair, 2 swords. "It's true then. You're the Witcher they speak of." Geralt's hand moved slightly toward his hilt. "Depends on who's asking." The stranger lowered his hood. His features were sharp, scarred by years of battle, and his eyes were the pale gray of stormlight. "Captain Doran Vane, late of the Redanian Guard. I've been searching for you. Word travels fast of what happened at Dreimholt and Holm. Then you've been following trouble." "Trouble's what I'm paid for," Doran said, sliding into the opposite seat. "And lately it's been following you. The priests in Oxenfurt sent me to find whoever's tampering with old shrines. They said it reeks of blasphemy. Now I see it reeks of something worse." His eyes flicked toward Irina. "A sorceress, of course." Irina's expression hardened. "You'll mind your tone, soldier." "Enough," Geralt said. "If you came for answers, ask." Doran leaned forward. "I came for warning. 3 nights ago, the northern monastery went silent. No messenger returned. The priests say the mountains glow red after dusk. Whatever curse you fought before, it's already there." The Witcher's jaw clenched. "Then it's begun." Doran nodded grimly. "If you're going after it, I'm coming too. I lost men stationed near that pass. If they're still breathing, I'll bring them back. If not, I'll make sure the thing that killed them doesn't draw another breath." Geralt studied him a moment. The man's eyes were honest, and his grip on the hilt at his belt spoke of skill, not bravado. "Fine," the Witcher said at last, "but you take orders when I give them. What we're hunting doesn't fight like men do. Understood. The storm raged deep into the night. When at last the fire burned low, Geralt rose to stand by the window. Beyond the glass, the village lay shrouded in mist and rain, but for an instant, lightning split the clouds, and far to the north, across the valley, a faint red glow pulsed against the mountains like a heartbeat. Irina joined him. "You see it too," she whispered. He nodded. "It's calling the rest of itself home." The next morning they set out before dawn. Geralt, Irina, and Captain Vane. The road climbed steeply toward the highlands, where the trees gave way to rock and the wind grew sharp as knives. By midday they reached the foothills, where the grass grew sparse and frost lingered in the shadows. The ruins of the monastery appeared at sunset, perched upon a cliff like the bones of a dead giant. Its bell tower leaned precariously, its stones streaked black with soot. As they drew closer, the air grew colder still. No birds sang. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Geralt dismounted and motioned for silence. "It's here." Irina's eyes flickered with unease. "The last sanctuary." Captain Vane unsheathed his sword. "Then let's end this." They climbed the final path on foot. The monastery gates stood open, and beyond them the courtyard was littered with bodies. Monks in brown robes, faces twisted in terror. The stone walls glowed faintly red, as if lit from within. Geralt stepped forward, his medallion trembling like a living thing. "It's not sleeping anymore," he said. Irina's breath caught. "Then we're too late." The Witcher drew his silver sword. The sound rang out clear and cold against the mountain air. "No," he said, "we're right on time." Thunder rolled again, echoing across the peaks as they entered the monastery, where gods and monsters had begun to blur into one. The monastery's gates groaned as they swung inward, metal rasping against stone. The sound carried far into the cold mountain air, swallowed by mist that clung to the cliffs. Within, the courtyard lay still, an unnatural stillness thick as a held breath. The monks' bodies lay where they had fallen, their robes dark with blood now frozen into the cracks of the cobblestones. Some still clutched their prayer beads, fingers stiff with frost. Geralt moved among them in silence, silver hair catching the weak light of dawn. His medallion vibrated faintly, reacting to a pulse that seemed to come from the very walls. Irina followed close behind, her face pale, lips pressed tight. Captain Vane knelt by one of the fallen, closing the man's eyes. "No wounds," he said grimly. "They didn't fight. They just died." Geralt crouched beside another corpse, examining it. The skin bore no mark of blade or claw, but a faint red shimmer pulsed beneath the surface, fading with every heartbeat of the dead. "Not a clean death," he murmured. "Their faith was drained from them. The curse feeds on devotion." Irina shivered, like breath stolen from a prayer. The Witcher rose, scanning the tall chapel at the courtyard's far end. Its doors hung open, light spilling out in long crimson bands. The glow pulsed faintly, rhythmic, alive. "That's where it's gathering," Geralt said, the relics calling to its other pieces. Without waiting for reply, he started forward. The others followed, boots crunching over the frozen ground. As they passed beneath the great arch, a whisper brushed their ears, soft at first, then growing louder, words in an ancient tongue, not spoken but breathed by the stones themselves. "Can you understand it?" Vane asked, tightening his grip on his sword. Irina nodded faintly. "It's an invocation."
a binding turned inside out. It's rewriting what was once holy. Inside the chapel was a cathedral of ruin. The roof had partially collapsed, letting daylight fall in broken shaft across the altar. The walls were carved with murals depicting Melitile's mercy. Farmers blessed with grain, mothers healed of sickness, children washed in the light of a faith. But each carving now bled red through the cracks, and the eyes of the saints had turned to hollow pits. At the altar's heart stood a statue, massive and cracked, its stone face half gone. The remaining half smiled faintly, a cruel, knowing smile. Before it, upon a dais of blackened marble, floated the relic's final fragment, spinning slowly in the air. It pulsed with each heartbeat that echoed faintly through the chapel. Geralt's medallion tugged toward it like a lodestone. "That's it," he said. "The last key." Irina's voice trembled. "If the other pieces were keys, this one's the lock. The goddess, whatever she was, lies behind it." Vane stepped forward. "Then we smash it before it wakes." But as he moved, the air grew thick, heavy with pressure. The faint whisper became a voice, many voices overlapping, chanting in unison. The monks' corpses in the courtyard began to stir, their heads lifted, eyes blazing with red fire. "Too late," Irina whispered. Geralt's sword flashed free. "Stay behind me." The first of the monks lurched through the chapel doors, their movements stiff but purposeful, their mouths opened in a single dreadful chorus. Faith reborn. Blood remembered. Vane charged, his blade cleaving through one, then another. Geralt moved with lethal precision, each strike clean, each motion calculated. The undead fell, yet for every one destroyed, another rose. The red light from the relic grew brighter, feeding them. Irina raised her hands, calling upon the wind. The air erupted into a vortex, flinging bodies aside, scattering pews and shards of glass. But the effort drained her. She stumbled, clutching her chest. "It's drawing from me," she gasped. "From anyone who still believes in anything." "Then stop believing," Geralt growled again, driving his sword through another corpse. "Doubt's safer company." But even he could feel it, the whisper gnawing at the edges of his thoughts, the lure of something vast and old, pressing against the world's thin veil. The relic's hum became a deep vibration that rattled the bones beneath their feet. The statue at the altar began to crack. Its stone surface split apart, revealing veins of molten light beneath. A shape moved within, vast and sinuous, like something imprisoned in the mountain itself. Irina's voice rose above the roar. "It's breaking free, Geralt. We can't destroy the relic. It'll release her completely." "Then what?" Vane shouted over the noise. "We let it live?" The sorceress's eyes flared blue as she summoned her remaining strength. "We bind it again, the same way the priests did, but this time with something stronger than faith." Geralt slashed through another foe and turned to her. "What do you need?" "A circle of life and death," she said quickly. "Blood freely given. Will stronger than prayer." Vane stepped forward without hesitation. "Take mine." The Witcher glanced at him, measuring the resolve in the man's face. There was no fear there, only grim purpose. Geralt nodded once. "Do it." Irina drew her dagger, slicing across Vane's palm. His blood fell upon the stone floor, and where it touched, runes flared into existence, old and powerful. She motioned for Geralt to stand opposite. "Your kind was made for this," she said. "You've already 1 foot in both worlds." Geralt nodded, biting his thumb and letting his own blood fall.
The circle sealed with a hiss of energy, light snaking across the chapel floor, encircling the relic. The undead froze, their red eyes dimming. The chant faltered, replaced by a low, resonant hum. Irina raised her hands higher, her voice ringing clear in the ancient tongue. The light of the circle intensified, swirling upward in a spiral of fire and shadow. The statue cracked fully, and from within it burst a torrent of crimson mist, a form half woman, half shadow, with eyes like burning suns. Lilith, the veiled goddess, stepped from her prison. Her voice filled the air, neither sound nor thought, but both. "You dare bind me again?" Geralt held his ground, the circle's light burning around him. "You should have stayed forgotten." The goddess laughed, a sound that made the air bleed. "You cannot chain vengeance. I am what men prayed for when mercy failed." Her hand extended toward Irina. The sorceress screamed as the goddess's power gripped her, lifting her from the ground. The circle trembled, beginning to unravel. Geralt lunged, planting his sword into the glowing floor. The runes flared brighter, reforging the circle's strength. "Now!" he shouted. "Finish it!" Irina's voice rose again, tears streaming down her face. "By will, not worship. By truth, not faith." The light exploded, swallowing the goddess in a pillar of fire. Her scream shook the mountain, the relic shattered, shards flying in every direction. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then the light collapsed inward, leaving nothing but ash. Geralt fell to one knee, breath ragged. The chapel was dark once more, the red glow gone. The undead had crumbled into dust. Vane knelt beside Irina, who lay still upon the floor. Her pulse fluttered weakly. "She's alive," he said softly. Geralt rose, retrieving his sword. "Then it's done." Outside, the storm broke. Rain swept across the mountains, washing the blood from the stones. The curse, for now, was ended. But as the Witcher looked to the horizon, he thought he saw a movement in the clouds, a shape vast and shifting. Watching still, he whispered to the wind, his voice barely a breath. "Some things never die. They just wait to be remembered." And as the rain fell upon the monastery, the white wolf walked into the storm once more, the scent of ash and divine wrath fading behind him. The storm did not end when they left the monastery. It merely followed, drifting like a wounded beast over the peaks. Rain fell in silver curtains, hissing against stone and steel. The wind keened through the crags, carrying with it the low groan of thunder. The mountains seemed alive, restless after what had been awoken and then chained again. Geralt led the way down the narrow path, Roach picking her steps carefully over the slick rock. Behind him rode Captain Vane, a strip of bloodied cloth tied around his hand, the mark of the binding ritual still raw. Irina rode last, silent, her face pale, her eyes distant. The Witcher glanced back at her once. She was awake, but something within her gaze had changed. There was no triumph in it, only the hollow knowing of someone who had glimpsed too much. When they reached the valley floor, the rain softened. A weak light filtered through the clouds, painting the world in dull silver. The monastery above them was barely visible now, its spire jutting through the mist like a broken spear. Geralt dismounted, brushing water from his hair. "We'll rest here," he said. "The horses can't take another climb tonight." They found shelter beneath a rock overhang. Geralt struck flint, coaxing a small flame to life. The fire sputtered and hissed, reluctant in the damp air. Vane sat close, his hands stretched toward the heat. Irina stood a few paces away, her cloak dripping.
After a long silence, the captain spoke. That thing we fought, was it truly a goddess? Geralt stared into the fire. Once, maybe, long before priests and temples taught men to name their fears, faith gave her shape. When the faith turned to fear, she turned into what they deserved. Vane frowned. You speak as if she still exists. She does, Geralt said quietly, somewhere beyond the veil. We didn't kill her. We just sealed the door again. Irina's voice came soft from the shadows, and doors can always be opened. The Witcher met her eyes. You knew that before we began? She nodded faintly. Yes, but I thought the price worth paying. Vane glanced between them. What price? The binding wasn't only blood, Geralt said. It required a sacrifice of power. She gave part of herself to seal it. The captain turned sharply to Irina. You mean... She smiled, though it was a weary, bitter thing. I can still feel her in me. The echo, a whisper in dreams. The fire popped, throwing sparks into the damp air. Geralt watched her in silence. That won't fade quickly. You'll need to leave these lands. Too much old faith here. I wasn't planning to stay, she said. There's a ship from Oxenfurt that sails for the southern isles. Maybe the sea will drown what's left of her voice. Geralt grunted. Maybe. They ate in silence. Dried meat, a crust of bread softened by rainwater. The wind moaned above them, carrying with it the smell of wet pine. When the fire burned low, Vane spoke again. What now, Witcher? You'll keep hunting monsters? Geralt gave a faint smile. That's what I'm for. Even after this? Especially after this, he said. There's always another curse waiting for fools to wake it. The captain nodded slowly. Then I'll ride with you if you'll have me. A sword's a sword. Geralt shook his head. You've seen enough death. Go home, Vane. Live while there's still a world left to live in. Vane looked as though he might argue, but in the end he only sighed. Aye, maybe you're right. He lay back against the rock, closing his eyes. Still, if the North ever needs a hand, you'll find me in Oxenfurt. There's always work for those who fought the impossible. The Witcher said nothing. The fire crackled, the rain whispered. When dawn came, it found the camp quiet. Vane was already awake, saddling his horse. He clasped Geralt's forearm in farewell and nodded to Irina. Whatever gods still listen, may they forget your name. She almost smiled. That would be a mercy. The captain rode east, vanishing into the morning mist. For a time, neither Geralt nor Irina moved. Then the Witcher turned to her. You'll head for the coast? Yes. There's a port 2 days' ride from here. She hesitated. Will you come? He shook his head. No. My road bends south. There's talk of drowners in the river towns. They don't bind gods, but they still kill plenty. She studied him as though trying to read something hidden behind his pale eyes. You never stop, do you? No, he said simply. Stopping doesn't suit me. She reached into her satchel and drew out a small object wrapped in cloth. Then take this. It's one of the relic's shards. The only piece that didn't crumble. He stared at it. That should have been destroyed. It's inert now, she said, but I thought you'd want proof, or a reminder. Geralt took it reluctantly. The shard glinted faintly red, like a coal that refused to die. Some reminders burn more than they teach. Then let it burn, she said softly. She turned away, mounting her horse. The Witcher watched her ride until she vanished beyond the curve of the hills. The rain had stopped. Only the dripping of water from the trees remained. Geralt looked at the shard once more, then slipped it into his pouch. He whistled for Roach and began to ride south, following the winding trail toward the lowlands. By evening, the sun had broken through at last, staining the clouds gold. The air smelled of wet earth and pine sap. He found a stretch of open field where the grass moved like waves, and there he paused. From the saddlebag he drew a small silver medallion shaped like a sunburst, the symbol taken from one of Dreimholt's dead priests. He held it beside the shard for a moment. The metal warmed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with his own heartbeat. "Still watching, aren't you?" he murmured. "Still waiting." He let the medallion fall into the grass, then turned Roach toward the distant horizon. Behind him, thunder rolled once more, faint, far away, yet lingering. The Witcher did not look back. The land was wide and the road ahead uncertain. But he had walked such roads all his life. The world would forget Dreimholt, Holm, and the mountain monastery soon enough. New wars would come. New monsters would crawl from the dark corners of men's hearts. And when they did, someone would have to stand in the rain again. Someone who had already spilled blood on holy ground and knew that no prayer could ever wash it clean. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the wild. Geralt of Rivia lowered his hood, letting the sunlight strike his scarred face. A faint smile touched his lips. Thin, fleeting, but real. Then he spurred Roach forward, the horse breaking into a steady trot. The road unwound before them, endless and empty, fading into the horizon's pale glow. And though the echoes of gods and curses still lingered behind him, the Witcher rode on, a lone shadow against the dying light. Tired, unblessed, but unbroken still, the path wound down from the mountains and into the low country, where the soil grew rich and dark, and the air was heavy with the smell of damp grass. For days Geralt rode without company, without speech. The world around him seemed hushed, as if the echoes of what had happened in those high halls still traveled through the wind. Every now and then, his medallion would tremble faintly, never enough to warn of danger, only enough to remind him that something unseen still stirred. He avoided villages where he could, preferring open roads and quiet woods. Word of Dreimholt and Holm Keep would already be spreading. Tales warped by frightened tongues whispered over tavern benches until even the smallest truth was buried under superstition. The Witcher had learned long ago that men feared what they could not name. They would call it a miracle or a curse, whichever suited them best. By the third evening, the rain had ceased, and the western sky glowed with the dim amber light of sunset. Geralt found an abandoned watchtower at the edge of a marsh and made camp beneath its crumbling arch. The wind was soft, carrying the croak of frogs and the distant splash of fish. It was almost peaceful, almost. He sat by the fire cleaning his sword. The silver blade still bore faint stains from the monastery, marks that no oil or whetstone could entirely erase. They shimmered faintly when the firelight caught them, like veins of red glass within steel. Roach stood nearby, muzzle buried in the wet grass. The Witcher looked up at her and spoke quietly, more to the silence than to the beast. "You'd think, after all these years, I'd learned to leave cursed places alone." The mare flicked her ears but did not answer. When he finally lay down, sleep came uneasily. Dreams pressed close, filled with whispers and the weight of unseen eyes. In one, he saw Irina standing upon a cliff above the sea, the wind tearing at her cloak,
Her face was lit by the glow of something she held, a shard still burning red as blood. She turned toward him, lips moving soundlessly, and the dream shattered into shadow. He woke before dawn, the fire reduced to embers. For a long moment he sat still, listening. The marsh was quiet, yet there, a faint sound, a child's cry. Geralt rose, hand on his sword. The cry came again, distant but clear. He followed it through the reeds until he found the edge of a shallow pond, its surface dark and still. In the mud lay a small wooden toy, carved roughly, its paint washed away. He crouched beside it. The water rippled, though no wind stirred. Then the surface broke. A pale hand shot upward, clawing at the air. Geralt leapt back as a figure dragged itself from the water, small, thin, its face obscured by dripping hair. It was a child or something that had once been one. The eyes were empty, glowing faintly red beneath the surface. A drowned one, twisted by lingering magic. Geralt's sword was in his hand before the creature could lunge. One clean strike, silver through bone. The body fell still, sinking slowly into the black water. He stared at the ripples long after they faded. Even here, he muttered, even now. When dawn finally broke, he was already on the road again. The marsh gave way to forest, and the forest to rolling fields dotted with wildflowers. The scent of smoke reached him by midday, a village ahead. He approached cautiously. The settlement was small, little more than a cluster of cottages, and a tavern marked with a painted boar. Farmers worked the fields, heads bowed. Children played near a well, their laughter carrying faintly through the breeze. Ordinary life, untouched by curses, by gods, by monsters. He dismounted before the tavern, tying Roach to the post. Inside, warmth and noise greeted him. Men drank, dice clattered, and the smell of ale hung heavy in the air. He took a seat by the window, ordering nothing. It didn't take long before someone recognized him. A young man at the bar glanced over, whispering to his companions. Soon the room grew quieter. "Witcher?" said the barkeep, wiping his hands on a rag. "You the one they're talking about up north? The ghost slayer of the mountains?" Geralt didn't look up. "Depends who's talking. They say you killed a goddess." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "If I had, she'd have stayed dead." The barkeep hesitated, then shrugged. "Well, curse or not, there's coin to be made. A couple of nights back, something tore up the sheep pens. Tracks led into the woods, but none of the lads will follow 'em. I'd pay for a look." "Later," Geralt said. "Not today." He rose to leave, but the barkeep caught his arm. "Careful out there, Witcher. Storm came through last night. The old shrine by the crossroads was struck by lightning. Folks say it bled." Geralt stopped, eyes narrowing. "Bled?" The man nodded quickly. "Aye. Red trickled down the stone. Priest came this morning to see it, said it's a sign the lady's still watching." The Witcher said nothing. He left the tavern and turned toward the crossroads. The path wound through the trees, and soon he saw the shrine, a small stone pillar crowned with the worn face of Melitele. The front was blackened by fire, and yes, streaks of red ran down its surface, glistening like fresh blood. He touched a drop with his glove. It was warm. Not blood, resin mixed with magic. A whisper stirred in his mind. "You cannot bind vengeance." Geralt stepped back sharply, hand on his sword. The air was still, the forest silent, but the shrine's cracks glowed faintly red, the same hue as the shard in his pouch. He exhaled slowly. So, not done after all. The wind rose, scattering leaves across the path. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled again, though the sky was clear. Geralt mounted Roach, his expression unreadable. "Seems the lady wasn't satisfied with her prison." The mare snorted as if in agreement. He turned the horse toward the northern road once more. The mountains loomed faintly on the horizon, shrouded by mist. Behind him, the shrine's faint light pulsed in the trees, one slow, steady beat like the heart of something waiting to be reborn. The Witcher did not look back. He had learned long ago that some evils never die. They simply find new ground, new faith to feed upon. As the wind carried the faint scent of storm toward him once more, Geralt tightened his grip on the reins and rode into the gathering dusk, the crimson shard at his belt flickering softly with each hoofbeat. And though he said nothing aloud, a single thought crossed his mind, quiet and grim as the coming night. Blood on holy ground never dries. The next day dawned gray and silent, the air thick with the promise of more rain. Geralt rode north, the road little more than a muddy scar winding through the trees. The world seemed hushed, as if waiting for something unseen to break the stillness. Birds did not sing, even the wind was subdued, whispering only faintly through the leaves. He had no destination. Witchers rarely did. The contracts that came their way were chance encounters, the result of rumor, fear, and gold. But since the shrine, since the blood that was not blood, Geralt felt the weight of purpose pulling him again toward the mountains, toward what he had tried to leave behind. At midday he stopped by a stream, letting Roach drink while he cleaned his sword. The crimson shard Irina had given him lay beside his pack, its glow faint but constant, pulsing in rhythm with the Witcher's own heartbeat. He had hoped it would cool, fade, and die. Instead, it warmed more each day. A rustle from the brush made him look up. A man stumbled from the woods, pale-faced and shaking, his clothes torn and soaked with mud. He fell to his knees before Geralt's fire. "By the gods, help me!" Geralt rose slowly. "What happened?" The man struggled for breath. "The village, Keln, less than a league east. It came in the night, smoke and fire, and something screaming like a woman, but not. He broke off, clutching his head. "My family's they're still there." Geralt's medallion trembled against his chest. The same vibration, the same low hum that had haunted him since Dreimholt. "Stay here," the Witcher said, mounting Roach. "Don't follow." The man reached for him, but Geralt was already gone, the mare's hooves churning up mud as they thundered toward the east. Keln appeared through the trees before long, a cluster of cottages nestled beside a river bend, or what had been cottages. Now only ruins remained, walls charred black, roofs caved in, smoke rose from the ashes in thin, weary threads. The stench of burnt flesh hung in the air. Geralt dismounted, silver sword in hand. He moved through the wreckage with the slow precision of one long accustomed to slaughter. Bodies lay scattered among the ruins, men, women, even children. None bore wounds. Their faces were serene, almost peaceful, as if death had come as a blessing. He crouched beside one of the corpses, touching the cold flesh, the same faint shimmer beneath the skin, the same trace of crimson light. The curse had spread. A sound drifted through the smoke, soft, like weeping. Geralt followed it to the riverbank. There, beneath the twisted remains of a bridge, knelt a woman. Her hair was white as frost, though her face was young, her hands red to the wrist. She rocked back and forth, whispering words the Witcher could barely hear. "Blessed be the faithful, blessed be the offering." Geralt raised his sword. "Step away from the water." The woman turned slowly. Her eyes were red, not the color of veins, but of light. "I was waiting," she said softly. Her voice was Irina's voice. Geralt froze. "Irina?" She smiled faintly. "Not anymore." The shard at his belt flared red, answering the glow in her eyes. The wind rose, swirling the ashes around them. Geralt's voice was low, steady. "What have you done?" "I carried her too long," she whispered. "She wanted to see the world again, to walk upon the earth. I thought I could hold her back, but she's stronger now." The faith of the dying called her name. Lilieth. The name hung in the air like a curse. Geralt drew the shard from his pouch, its light pulsing violently. "If she's inside you, she can be driven out." Irina's laugh was soft and terrible. "You can't drive out what's already become flesh. You can only kill it. And to kill it, Witcher, you must kill me." She rose, the river churning red around her feet. The air grew heavy. The sky darkened. Geralt could feel her power, ancient, divine, and furious. Lightning crackled in the clouds. "Irina," he said, his grip tightening. "Fight her." Her eyes softened for a heartbeat. "I've tried." Then the light consumed them again. The river exploded upward as something vast moved beneath the surface, a shape of water and shadow, rising, coiling, taking form. A woman's figure, woven from the flood itself, towering above the ruins. Lilith's voice thundered, filling the valley. "You bound me in faith. You broke me with blood. Now the two are one." Geralt leapt aside as the wave crashed down, scattering debris and corpses. Roach screamed and bolted. The Witcher landed hard, rolling through mud, sword flashing, and he came to his feet. He muttered a sign, "Irden," and the violet circle sprang up around him, holding the flood at bay. Irina's form strode through the storm, her feet barely touching the ground. Every drop of rain that fell turned to red mist when it neared her. "End it," she cried. "Before she takes everything." Geralt's jaw clenched. "You know I will." He drew from his belt a vial, black glass sealed with wax, a potion so old even Vesemir had warned him never to use it. He broke the seal with his teeth and swallowed. Pain lanced through his veins. The world sharpened, sounds splitting into crystal clarity. His pupils became slits. He moved. The sword struck true, silver slicing through flesh that was not flesh. Light burst outward, blinding, burning. Irina screamed, not in pain but release. The goddess shrieked with her, a sound like thunder shattering stone. Geralt drove the blade deeper until both woman and spirit collapsed into the river. The water hissed and boiled, steam rising in columns. Then all fell silent. When the mist cleared, the Witcher stood alone upon the bank. His sword dripped crimson. The river ran clear once more. He knelt beside what was left of her. The light had faded from her eyes. Her body was still. He closed her lids gently. "You fought harder than any priest." Something glinted beside her hand, a silver chain, the pendant of Melitele blackened with soot. He took it, slipping it into his pouch beside the dead shard. The sky broke open then, sunlight piercing through the clouds. Birds cried overhead, the first sound of life to return. The world seemed to breathe again. Geralt sheathed his sword. His reflection stared back at him from the water's surface, pale and hard. For a long time he said nothing, then softly, "We're done now." He mounted Roach, turning away from the ruined village. Behind him the river flowed quietly, carrying away the last traces of red. But as he rode, the shard at his belt gave one faint pulse, one heartbeat and then another.
The Witcher didn't look down. He only whispered to the wind, "Stay buried." Far behind, the sun slipped lower, casting the valley in gold. The air was clear, the world at peace. Yet somewhere deep beneath the earth, where water met stone, a single note of laughter echoed faintly, soft, distant, and patient as time itself. For several days Geralt rode without aim or direction, following the long, ragged roads that stitched their way across the north. The skies were gray again, the air sharp with the scent of frost, and the forests stood silent as tombs. Winter approached, though the Witcher felt its chill, more in spirit than in bone. Each night he camped alone, listening to the crackle of firewood and the far-off calls of wolves. And each dawn he woke to find the shard at his belt still faintly glowing, as if warmed by some unseen hand. He had tried to bury it once, beneath a cairn of stones on the edge of the woods. Yet when morning came, he found it lying beside him once more, unsoiled, its pulse slow and patient. He didn't try again. The road led him at last to a wide plain, where an ancient battlefield lay forgotten. Rusted helms jutted from the ground like weeds. Shattered pikes stood leaning, their shafts bleached by the seasons. The Witcher dismounted and walked among them, boots sinking in the wet earth. Here, in this place of old blood and old prayers, he could almost hear the whisper of the dead. He paused by a fallen banner, a sunburst barely visible upon the tattered cloth. Melitele's sign. The same god whose name had been twisted, broken, used to bind what should never have been called. Geralt sighed. "Always circles," he muttered. "Always the same stories told again." The wind shifted then, carrying a sound, faint hooves, distant but steady. The Witcher turned, his hand brushing the hilt of his sword. From the mist came a rider, cloaked in black, the emblem of Redania's crown upon his shoulder. The man slowed when he saw Geralt, lifting a hand in greeting. "White Wolf," he called, "you've left corpses from here to the mountains. Hard not to find you." Geralt recognized him at once. Doran Vane, the soldier who had survived the monastery. He looked older, his beard thicker, eyes heavier. "Didn't think you'd still be breathing," Geralt said. Vane dismounted, giving a thin smile. "Takes more than ghosts and gods to kill me, though I came close enough. I heard about Keln." Geralt's tone darkened. "Then you know it's finished." Vane nodded slowly. "Finished? For now?" He gazed over the battlefield. "But the stories are spreading. Pilgrims talk of blood-red rivers, of the lady's face seen in every storm. People are praying again, Witcher. To her." Geralt's expression did not change. "They always do. It's easier to kneel than to remember." The soldier looked at him then, truly looked. "You can't save them from their faith." "I don't try to," the Witcher said quietly. "I just clean up the mess it leaves." The two men stood in silence for a while. The sky darkened as clouds gathered heavy with the promise of more rain. Vane broke the stillness. "I came to warn you. The Church of the Eternal Fire is moving south. They're calling the temples heretical, burning them one by one. Anything tied to Melitele, or what they think is her, is being destroyed. They're looking for you, Geralt. They say you carry something of the goddess with you." Geralt's hand brushed his belt unconsciously. "Maybe they're not wrong." Vane's gaze followed the movement. "Then get rid of it, whatever it is." "I tried." The soldier's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe it doesn't want to leave you." A gust of wind stirred the grasses, bringing with it the first drops of rain. Geralt turned back toward Roach, his tone final. "Leave the north, Doran. There's war coming again." I can smell it. And you? I go where I'm needed. He mounted without another word, the shard pressing faintly against his side, its warmth, an unwelcome heartbeat. He rode north again as the rain thickened, blurring the line between land and sky. The road grew rougher, the fields giving way to wild hills. Once or twice he glimpsed movement on the horizon, shapes that might have been travelers or shadows walking upright. His hand never left the reins, though his senses told him nothing approached. At dusk, he came upon a ruined chapel standing alone amid the hills. Its roof was half collapsed, its doors long gone, yet within candles burned, new ones, their flames trembling in the wind. The Witcher dismounted and entered. The air smelled of wax and incense. The altar was cracked, the stone floor uneven, but before it knelt a group of villagers, 5 in all, heads bowed, voices murmuring a single name over and over. Liliath, Liliath, Liliath. Geralt's voice cut through the murmur. You should stop praying. The villagers turned, startled. One, a woman with gray hair and wild eyes, rose to her feet. You Witcher? You've come from her, haven't you? The Lady of the Red Dawn? She's no lady, Geralt said flatly. She saved us, another cried. The drought broke when we built her altar. The fields live again. She hears us. Geralt stepped closer. She hears everything, and she always wants more. He looked down. The altar was carved with the same sigil he had seen before. A sun split in two. Blood, still fresh, stained the grooves. The Witcher's medallion vibrated violently. She asked for an offering, the gray-haired woman said. Only a small one, a calf. We gave it freely. Geralt's eyes hardened. That wasn't a calf. He drew his sword. The villagers shrank back. Get out, he said, his tone like iron. Go home, forget her name. But even as they fled into the rain, the ground beneath the chapel trembled. Cracks spidered across the floor, and from within them seeped light, deep red, pulsing. Geralt cursed under his breath. So this is how it starts again. The light grew, swirling into mist. From it came the faint echo of a voice, soft, feminine, and terrible in its tenderness. You kill and bind, Witcher, yet still you call my name. Geralt gripped his sword tighter. Because you won't stop whispering it. The mist coalesced into a form, a shadow shaped like Irina, her eyes calm, her lips curved in a sad smile. We are bound, you and I, she said. Blood and memory. You sealed me in flesh once, now you carry the last piece. The shard at his belt blazed to life, the glow spilling from beneath his cloak. Geralt's voice was low. Then I'll bury it with me. The figure stepped closer, and so the tale begins anew. He swung. The blade sliced through the mist, scattering it like smoke. The glow faded, the tremor ceased. Only the sound of rain remained, soft and endless upon the broken roof. Geralt stood alone, sword lowered, the breath leaving him slow and heavy. He reached into his pouch, drew out the shard. It pulsed once, twice, then stilled. Enough, he whispered. He placed it on the cracked altar and drove his sword down through it. The steel shattered the stone, sparks flying. The glow winked out. Outside, the storm began to break. Light returned to the hills, soft and colorless. Geralt retrieved his blade and stepped into the open air, the rain cooling the sweat on his brow. For a moment he stood still, listening. No whisper followed. No warmth stirred at his side. Only silence, vast and clean. He mounted Roach and turned toward the north once more. The path stretched before him, long and uncertain, and though his heart was heavy for the first time since Dreimholt,
he felt something close to peace, thin, fragile, and fleeting as dawn light on a blade. Morning broke pale and thin, casting light across the northern plains like a veil of silver. The rain had passed at last, leaving the air sharp and cold, the world scrubbed clean of color. Geralt rode through it in silence, his cloak drawn close, his mind as still as the land around him. The roads were empty, the fields half frozen, and above the distant tree line the sky stretched clear and endless. The shard was gone, buried and broken in the ruins of the chapel, but its absence felt strange, like a phantom limb. For the first time in weeks, his medallion was quiet. He stopped at a stream to water Roach and knelt by the bank, cupping cold water in his hands. The reflection that looked back at him was older than he remembered. Eyes lined by sleeplessness, hair glistening with silver instead of white. The years had not changed him much, yet something within him had shifted, imperceptible but deep. He had spent his life killing what others feared, but gods, he thought bitterly, gods were the hardest to kill, for they were made of belief, and belief never truly died. Roach snorted, her ears twitching. Geralt looked up. Across the field stood a small cart, half buried in mud, its wheels splintered. A boy no older than 12 struggled beside it, trying to free the axle with a stick. The Witcher rose, approaching slowly. "Need a hand?" The boy looked up, eyes wide. You're a Witcher, ain't you?" Geralt nodded once. The boy hesitated, then stepped back from the wheel. "Aye, sir." The cart broke on the road. Father went to find help in the village, but he's not come back. It's been 2 nights. "Which village?" "Trenholm, up by the ridge." Geralt frowned. "That's a long way. You've been here alone?" The boy nodded again. "Didn't dare leave the horse. He's all we've got left." The Witcher crouched by the wheel. It was shattered beyond fixing. He rose. "Come on, I'll see you to Trenholm. No point waiting for ghosts." The boy's relief was plain, though his eyes kept darting to Geralt's swords. Together they set out, the boy leading the horse, the Witcher walking beside him. As they went, the boy spoke, words tumbling out in nervous bursts. "They say Witchers don't feel nothing. That true?" Geralt's answer came dry as flint. "You believe everything they say?" The boy shrugged. "No, sir. But I heard one once saved a town from a curse, killed a demon that fed on prayers." Geralt gave no reply. The story no doubt had already twisted its way south. A demon that fed on prayers, that was close enough to the truth. By evening they reached Trenholm, a cluster of cottages beneath a rocky hill. Smoke rose from chimneys, and lanterns burned in windows. The Witcher's eyes, sharp in the dusk, caught details the boy missed: the fresh graves behind the chapel, the marks of torches burned into the soil. The villagers saw them as they entered. A murmur spread like a ripple through water. A Witcher, arriving with a child and no father in sight. Geralt ignored the stares, leading the boy to the tavern. Inside, warmth and the smell of stew filled the air. The barkeep looked up sharply. "No trouble, Witcher?" "None," Geralt said. "This boy's father came this way 2 nights ago." "Seen him?" The man frowned, then glanced toward the door of a side room. "He came fevered and wild, spoke of fire in the hills, died before dawn." The boy froze. "No, you're lying." Geralt knelt, placing a steady hand on the child's shoulder. "He's not lying. Come with me." They went to the small room. A blanket covered a shape on the bed. The boy's breath caught. Geralt lifted the blanket just enough for him to see.
The face beneath was peaceful, untouched by violence, but his lips were faintly red, as if stained with wine or something far darker. The Witcher replaced the cloth. The barkeep crossed himself. He said the lady was calling again, that he saw her eyes in the rain. Geralt's expression hardened. Where? Up in the old quarry, the barkeep said. By the marshes. No one goes there now. Cattle die when they graze near. The boy clung to Geralt's cloak. Don't go, sir, please. Geralt looked down at him, weary and certain. I have to, it's what I do. He left before dawn, climbing toward the quarry. Mist lay thick across the moors, and the ground was soft underfoot. He found the place easily, an ancient pit carved into the hill, half filled with stagnant water. A ruined altar stood near its edge, older than any chapel, older than memory. And on the altar, faint but real, glowed the symbol of a divided sun. Geralt sighed. So this is where you ran, then? He drew his sword. The medallion quivered against his chest. From the water rose a shimmer of light, thin, wavering like the reflection of a flame. It gathered form slowly, coalescing into the image of a woman with white hair and calm eyes. You cannot destroy me, Witcher, said the voice that was not sound. You break my name, but others will whisper it again. You bury my relics. But the earth remembers. Geralt's voice was low. Maybe, but I can keep you quiet a while longer. The specter smiled faintly. Then kill me once more, killer of monsters. See if it changes the song they sing of you. He moved faster than thought. The silver blade cut through the light, scattering it like smoke. A burst of wind tore through the quarry, sending water splashing against the stone. The glow vanished. Only the wind remained. Geralt lowered his sword, breath slow, heart steady. Songs fade, he muttered. He turned back toward the village. The sky above the hills had begun to brighten, streaked with pale rose and gold. By the time he returned to Trenholm, the boy was waiting near the well, eyes red from crying. Is it gone? He asked. For now. The boy nodded, swallowing hard. Will it come back? Everything does, the Witcher said. Then, seeing the fear on the boy's face, he added quietly, but not for a long time. He gave the innkeeper enough coin for the boy's keep and turned toward the road. The wind was rising again, but not with storm. Just the restless sigh of the world, returning to its rhythm. When he mounted Roach, the horizon was clear, the first sunlight spilling across the fields. He breathed deep. The air smelled of frost and ash, of endings. He did not look back as he rode east toward the forests, where men's fears were simpler and the monsters less divine. The wind tugged at his cloak, the hoofbeats echoed steady and sure, and behind him the village of Trenholm faded into the morning mist. For now the world was quiet. For now the blood on holy ground had dried, but somewhere, deep beneath earth and time, the faintest tremor stirred. A breath, a sigh, a memory, and the Witcher of Rivia rode on, knowing peace never lasted long in a land that still prayed to gods who listened.